Today, the Living with Wildlife Illinois team is hosting a question and answer session about grassland and prairie wetland birds at Prairie Ridge State Natural Area. I'm Laura Kamen.
And I'm Kathy Andrews Wright. Today, Bob Gillespie with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources is joining us. Before we get started, Bob, could you please give us a little bit of background about yourself, please?
Certainly. I'm a grassland ecologist with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and I am the site manager at Prairie Ridge State Natural Area, which is located in downstate Illinois, near Effingham, Illinois.
So Prairie Ridge State Natural Area is well known as the only location where greater prairie chickens can still be found in Illinois today. But what many people aren't aware of is that the grassland management practices utilized to maximize quality habitat for that endangered species actually benefits lots of other birds as well, including a number that are also endangered. Why is the grassland habitat maintained at Jasper and Marion counties so attractive to the wildlife?
Laura, management at Prairie Ridge is conducted to maximize the available quality habitat for grassland wildlife, and in particular, greater prairie chickens, but many other grassland species of conservation concern, as you stated. The overarching goal of the area is to provide high quality habitat for greater prairie chickens. In so doing, we provide quality habitats for many other species. Greater prairie chickens are essentially what is known as an umbrella species, meaning that if one provides habitat for greater prairie chickens, they will benefit many of the other habitats for other species. All right. So greater prairie chickens require many different grassland cover types throughout their life histories. From when they're a little chick to when they're a full grown adult, they have many different requirements for their habitat. And all those different cover types benefit a multitude of species.
One of those species that the habitat benefits, especially in the winter months, is the Illinois endangered short-eared owl. Can you give us a little bit of background about the short-eared owl? Because it is really a popular draw to a lot of birders and photographers every year.
Right now, when we're recording this, it's the early part of winter, and short-eared owls are all over the sanctuary. We have many short-eared owls on the area right now, and birders are traveling the roadways with their cameras and getting just beautiful photographs of short ears. So short ears are very abundant right now. Short-eared owls are a medium-sized owl, and true to their name, they do not have pronounced ear-like feathered tufts like great horned owls do. Short ears are a grassland bird and an efficient predator of small grassland rodents. Grassland supports healthy prey bases of small animals, and short ears make great advantage of that. Short ears are active at dusk and have kind of a notable, buoyant, floppy flight that's very distinctive to them. They hunt at dusk and at dawn, as well as nocturnally, so in the nighttime. But they may be seen hunting during the day when skies are overcast and gray and growly. Short ears, they'll roost on the ground in the meadows during rest periods. And they can also be very vocal with each other. That's really fun. They have a distinct bark-like call that's often heard when they're cruising over the same meadows. So they'll kind of vocalize with each other. And I like to tell one story. This year, when I was out conducting our mowing operations on Prairie Ridge, I was in an area that had several short ears. It was late fall. It had several short ears that were roosting in that. And as I would make a pass with the mower, they'd get up and they'd do their floppy flight around the tractor and bark at me and different things. And then they'd land not too far away. And I thought, well, I'm disturbing them, during the middle of the day. But the funny thing that happened is they would fly just a little ways and they'd move to the other side where I'd mowed already. And I happened to catch one short ear out of the corner of my eye, and I watched him. He flew over and landed next to a clump of grass. And I'm like, let's see what he does. And about that time, he did a little side hop back behind a clump of grass and hid in the shadow of that clump of grass and just absolutely disappeared into the grassland. And I thought that was really curious that he found a nice, cozy, hidden place in his grassland.
Two other endangered species that can be found in those grasslands there are Henslow sparrows and northern harriers. Bob, what would you want our viewers to know about those two species?
Northern harriers, they're also known as marsh hawks, feed essentially on the same prey base as short-eared owls do. And they are a wonderful example of niche partitioning in that short ears and northern harriers use the same habitats. They consume the same prey, but in this case, they hunt at different times. Harriers most commonly during the daytime, whereas short ears occupy the more shadowy periods and at night. So they're deconflicting their use of the resource. Harriers are fascinating grassland birds that can be seen hovering over the meadows, searching for prey. You see them oftentimes, they will hover or soar, if you will, in a very kind of low fashion over the meadows, kind of steadily searching for prey items. The males of the species have breeding plumage that is slate gray. They are very handsome. And the females are more cryptic with brown striping, and that allows them to hide during incubation on the ground. Okay. Harriers are interesting in that they will defend their nest with aggressive swoops if, say, an area manager gets too close to the nest, if you will. Henslow sparrows are also a wonderful grassland bird. They're a little sparrow, and they can be heard singing usually in mid-April at Prairie Ridge when they arrive back. They are known to utilize more robust grassland cover or heavier stands of grasses, but they can be heard in our brome and redtop meadows as well. Henslows are identified, I mean, they're a sparrow, so they're fairly cryptic and can be hard to identify by sight at times, but they're most easily identified by their call, which is a kind of a slick slick, which they often make when they're concealed rather well at their habitats. So when we are viewing greater prairie chickens in the spring, usually the first calls of Henslow sparrows arriving back from migration are heard. So like in mid-April or so.
Fascinating information. Like the historic Illinois prairie, it's just not all a grassland. And Prairie Ridge is not just a pure grassland. There are some restored prairie wetland areas to replicate what we were like historically. And it's on those wetlands where birders and photographers may, if they are patient, find a secretive water bird. So Bob, what are some of the secretive birds that people that hang out around the wetlands might be able to find?
Prairie Ridge has many wetlands, and significant acreage of Prairie Ridge is a wet meadow condition in and of itself. So during the winter and springtime months, it is a very wet prairie. Several wetlands are available for area visitors to explore on Illinois Audubon sanctuaries at Prairie Ridge. So the Robert Ridgway grassland has a wonderful wetland that's in Jasper County. And the Bartels grassland in Marion County has several different wetlands that are wonderful to view as well. Both of those two areas have a walking trail. The Ridgway grassland has an overlook where you can look out over the wetland, and both of them I highly recommend for birders to visit. The wetland features support many water birds. American bitterns can be heard calling from the cattails and reeds in the spring and early summer months. And over the wet meadows, common snipe, which is one of my favorites, can be heard winnowing, and woodcock can be heard pinting during the early spring, particularly at dusk and in the early morning hours. We usually hear them when we're out in the early morning, heading out to view greater prairie chickens. Occasionally, we observe upland sandpipers in the shorter sedgy meadows in the spring and summer. And then sorrel rails and yellow rails are often seen when conducting vegetation management in the meadows in late fall. Of course, you can always encounter sorrels and at times yellow rails around the wetlands as well. Yellow rails, we see them oftentimes notably arriving late in October in the fall migration. We see them then. The wetlands also support many shorebirds, greater yellowlegs, willets, black-necked stilts, golden plovers, and other different peeps that I didn't mention, but they will visit our wetland mudflats in late summer during migration. And of course, we have many species of waterfowl that utilize the wetlands. Green wing and blue wing teal, shovelers, mallards, and many wading water birds use the wetlands. And occasionally we have whooping cranes when they're passing through on migration that have been observed to stop over on our area wetlands. Our wetlands are fantastic. They're very much worth a visit from birders.
Definitely. And obviously the endangered species that we've been talking about make that drive well worth it. As of all the species in the wetlands that you were just talking about, are there any other bird species there at Prairie Ridge that you would encourage visitors to come out and see, and maybe what time of year those birds would be available to view?
Right now when we're recording this, it's nearly the dead of winter. We're in January right now, but spring is just around the corner. And spring arrivals to watch for are, of course, red-winged blackbirds. They are very abundant on the prairie and around the wetlands. Henslow sparrows will be arriving back, and then we often hear the first dickcissels come back too. Year-round residents are meadowlarks, and during the wintertime, when the sun comes out, the meadowlarks will start to sing like it's springtime. So it won't be long till we'll hear their melodious springtime call. We have lots of bobwhite quail that are year-round residents also, and you can hear covey calls in the fall and their springtime vocalizations. And oftentimes outside my window here at the office, we have a covey of a bobwhite quail that'll come up into the yard from time to time. So they're abundant on the area. Fall migration brings sedge wrens, which are a really neat little wren that I see a lot because I'm out on the meadows so much in the fall. But they are very secretive also, and they seem to spend a lot of time just burrowing around in the grass and jumping from one clump to another, and they just seem to dive right into the habitat. They're fun. And yellow rails, we see them in the fall in the meadows. The winter months are mostly the time for the sparrow enthusiast, if you will. And of course, those that like water birds, especially waterfowl, the winter is that time of year. But savanna sparrows and lecontes, they occupy our foxtail cover strips and weedy areas on the sanctuary. And like I said, for some sparrow enthusiasts, it's a wonderful time to get out and see if you can make a correct ID.
Okay, I'm ready for a trip. I got to get this planning effort underway. So, Bob, what are some tips that you would provide somebody like me who's ready to start heading down to Jasper and Marion counties to explore Prairie Ridge State Natural Area?
Well, come on down. That's all I have to say. Now, spring and fall are choice times to visit this grassland area. Summer is fine, but it is summer in southern Illinois on a grassland. So it is hot and it is ticky, it is humid, and generally it's a more difficult time for birding, and a time when many grassland bird species are nesting or rearing their young, and they're rather secretive, much more so than the other times of the year. I would recommend that area visitors be prepared for wet ground conditions. And I know that sounds silly, but Prairie Ridge can be much wetter than expected, and ground conditions can be muddy and saturated during some of the best birding times. And if you're coming down to Prairie Ridge to bird, you're likely going to encounter wet conditions because you may visit the meadows, which are totally saturated in the spring and through the winter. And you will certainly visit the wetlands, which require some good knee boots. So bring boots that can get muddy and keep your feet dry. Also, prepare for cold if one is viewing during the early spring or during the winter. The wet cold can be very depleting. And especially if you're coming down to view greater prairie chickens, dress warmly. And visitors should be prepared to combat the cold. Prairie Ridge has many select areas where visitors can use hiking trails for birding and designated areas to view the spring courtship of greater prairie chickens. So birders should bring their favorite binoculars, of course, and in some instances, viewing opportunities can be enhanced with a good spotting scope or a zoom lens equipped camera, which a lot of photographers or a lot of birding enthusiasts have now. So those are my recommendations for coming down here.
Excellent. We will bring our boots and our binoculars. Thanks, Bob, for joining us today and sharing information about all the birds that call Prairie Ridge home. For our viewers, if you have questions
very
about other
welcome.
Illinois wildlife, or if you have suggestions for future question and answer sessions, please send those in to the Wildlife Illinois website, and we'll see you next time.